Hello, today I am doing a book on haul. I love getting rid of books. I have too many books. If they're not serving me, if I'm not going to reread them, if I'm not going to lend them out to someone, or if I don't want them forever for some reason, I'm getting rid of them. That's what I'm doing today. I'll just take you through those books, hopefully quickly, because I feel like it's boring when these videos are too long. So the first three books kind of fit into a pattern, and that's because they're all by the same author. These are all the Isabel Allende books that I've read, and to be honest, I want to like her so bad, and I still want to try like House of Spirits or maybe some of her earlier work to like try to understand it more. But the books that I chose were just not the books for me. I wasn't a fan of them, so I'm gonna be getting rid of them. So the first book I have here is Isabel Allende's Daughter of Fortune. This book follows a young girl from Chile who goes to California during the gold rush, and she's trying to chase after this boy that she's in love with. I just didn't like it. This is the book that made me realize that Allende's writing and just her style in general wasn't for me, most likely. I don't even know what to say, to be honest. I just wasn't crazy about it. So yeah. The next one is A Long Petal of the Sea. This one follows refugees from the Spanish Civil War who then move to Chile and they make their home there, and then eventually the dictatorship happens, and then it even goes after the dictatorship. This one I've talked about recently. It just covered way too much ground for me. It really made me lose touch with the story and lose interest because it was just too much. I'm being really great at describing things today. I'm gonna do better with the next ones. The last Isabel Allende book, My Invented Country. I went into this thinking it was her memoir, and it's kind of not. It's kind of just like an experience of nostalgia, like her talking about Chile, and all the things that she loves about it and what Chile is like. And at the very end, it mentions the coup. I picked this up because on the back, it made it seem like this book was about the coup in Chile, and it wasn't. So I was so disappointed while reading this. I do still like the idea of like her invented country because she considers it her home, but she's lived most of her life outside of it now. I think that's a cool idea to talk about your home like that, you know? But at the same time, as someone who majored in sociology and anthropology in undergrad, just the way that she was making these wide generalizations about Chile was driving me insane. Like, she just, I wonder if I can find an example. Like this one. This one isn't that bad, to be honest. There's much worse examples, but on this page it says, in our house, as in every Chilean home, there were animals. And it's just like, are there though? Does every single person in Chile have multiple animals in their home? Now, I understand this is one small example, but imagine just an entire book of someone making these wide generalizations about something that applies to every Chilean home or every person in Chile or every woman or every man. It was bugging me. And again, it's not what I picked it up for because the back is trying to sell the book and the publisher knows that the coup is very interesting to people, so the back stressed that more. It just was not for me. I am still interested in reading her actual memoir though, because apparently she did write a book that like follows her life. I just didn't do enough research before picking this one up. Next we've got a behemoth. This is The Socialist Party of America, A Complete History by Jack Ross. This book is huge. So I did my undergraduate thesis on the modern Marxist movement, and I bought this book so I could learn more about like socialism in the United States and its history. But first of all, I realized I didn't really need to go into that in my thesis at all. Second of all, this book was huge, so I honestly was never going to get through it. I was just way too aspirational when I picked this book out. And third, I tried starting it, and oh my god, it's so poorly written. It's hard in nonfiction because nonfiction can be a little boring, but the difference is that there's so many bad nonfiction writers because they get away with just telling a very boring history. But it doesn't have to be like that. History is interesting and you can write it interestingly. This author was just mentioning like all these, like he would mention a name like for a second and then all these other people and then all these other people. It's like, how are you supposed to hold on to all of that? It was just too much information, not written in a way that makes you retain any of it. And then also, number 4, I should have done more research before picking this up, because when you talk about socialism especially, you don't want to just pick up like a propaganda book, you know? There's so much stuff out there that's written, especially in America, that's just like anti-communism propaganda, but it would be packaged like this. So I don't know if that's the case for this one exactly, but I think that if I go into a book about the history of socialism in the United States, I want it to be written by someone who isn't just completely against socialism. And the fact that I don't know this name and I don't know, his politics kind of turns me off. Then we've got My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I read this book and I liked it. It's kind of just like a modern version of Lolita. You're following this girl who had a predatory relationship with one of her teachers when she was like 15, and it takes place in two different timelines. So like one, you're following her as a teenager, one, she's being preyed upon by this teacher, and then you're also following her in her like mid to late 20s when there's like the Me Too movement, and another girl from that school came out about that teacher and about how he also was preying on her, and she's kind of dealing with her feelings because she doesn't see herself as a victim. She still sees him as her first love, stuff like that. So I liked this book. There's nothing wrong with it. I just know that I don't like it enough to reread it or give it to anyone else. I just don't need it on my shelf. Then I have 3 random books that my boyfriend is getting rid of because we share a bookshelf. One is Religion in Philadelphia. I don't know what any of these are or why he's giving them away. The Norton Introduction to Literature, and the Norton Anthology of Drama. So those 3 are in here. Next we've got Going Bovine by Libba Bray. I hated this book. I talked about it in my worst books of 2021. You're following this main character who's like a teenage boy and he's diagnosed with mad cow disease, and then all this weird stuff starts happening. Like, he starts seeing weird stuff. He has to go on this journey. I found the humor very outdated. I didn't like the perspective of a 16-year-old boy, to be honest. I was not into this at all. It was a torture to get through. Then we've got another book that was in my worst books of the year video, and that is Rose Madder by Stephen King. This book follows a girl named Rose as she escapes an abusive relationship. It was just boring. It was just really boring. Put me in a reading slump. I usually try to keep my Stephen King novels, especially the hardcover ones, because I kind of like it from a collection point of view, but there's just no point in keeping the ones I don't like, because there's so many books out there and I have such limited space, so this one's going. Then we've got War in the Age of Trump by Patrick. I don't know how to say this last name. I know that this is kind of like a more English last name. I know it's not Cockburn, but that's the only way you can read it. I know it's a different name, but I'm not gonna try because I'm sorry. I don't feel like it. This book I haven't even read. It just talks about war in the age of Trump. It talks about the defeat of ISIS, the fall of the Kurds, the conflict with Iran. I'm not interested. I had to read one of this author's books about the war on terror for a class I took in undergrad, and I remember the writing being really boring and it being really hard to get into, even though I was interested in the subject. And I got this book for a subscription service I had through Verso Books, and it was kind of just like a free add-on when you first joined, and I'm just never gonna read this. I'm just never gonna read it, so it's leaving me. After that, I'm also parting with McGlue by Tessa Moshfegh. This was the first Moshfegh book I read, and I hated it. It was not a good way to start. I'm kind of sad because I love this cover so much. Like, so much. I almost wanted to keep it just for the cover, but I'm not going to do that because I'm going to be sensible for once in my life. This book follows, like, a random dude in, like, the 1800s who is an alcoholic, and he wakes up after some, like, drunken thing, and he's told that he killed his best friend, and he goes through this whole book thinking, like, that's not true, and then you come to terms with it at the end. It just wasn't good. It's not interesting. I do not recommend this at all. I don't want it in my life. And then another book I hated, Deerskin by Robin McKinley. This is a fantasy novel that follows a princess who has to, like, flee her kingdom because her mom dies, and then her dad tries to marry her, which is gross. And, like, the premise is fine, but the author just wouldn't shut up about dogs the whole time. The characters are very dimensional. They're boring to read about. The book is boring to read. I didn't like it. Goodbye. And then the last book I'm getting rid of today is Idaho by Emily Ruskovich. I think is how you say her name. I'm sorry. I picked this book up just because it was pretty, which honestly should have been the first red flag. It follows this woman who is married to this man, and his memory is failing, and it kind of follows the relationship, but then also it has all these flashbacks to an earlier period of time when her husband was married to his first wife and they had 2 daughters, and one of the daughters was murdered by her mother and the other went missing. So it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's a thriller because nothing in this book reads like a thriller. I think I went into it expecting it to be more of a thriller, like expecting to find out what happened to, like, the second missing daughter, or expecting, I don't know, there to be some mystery as to if the wife actually killed the daughter. It doesn't really go into anything about that. It's more so like the relationships between these people. It was not for me. I thought it was kind of boring. So I don't want this one either, even though Very pretty cover. So there you have it. Those are all the books I'm gonna be getting rid of. I usually try to donate them to prisons, but I have a lot of hardcovers in here, and prisons usually don't take hardcovers, which is stupid. So I'm just gonna donate this to my local bookstore. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.